The Eastern Free State is a lush mountainous region situated in the heart of South Africa. It borders on Lesotho and lies in the foothills of the Great Maluti Mountains. Its fertile valleys support a farming economy, and it's long been known as the breadbasket of South Africa. One of the region's most advanced agricultural enterprises is Sandstone Estates, a 5,000-hectare commercial farm. Sandstone is recognized as one of the most highly organized farms in the country, a flagship for both government and private enterprise. It produces a range of crops, including wheat, sunflowers, and soya beans. The farm is to a large degree self-sufficient, with its own silos and workshops, giving it the capacity to dry, store, process, and even package its own product. This gives it a considerable advantage in the market and a valuable return on investment.
Sandstone has a huge investment from our international investors. Big money has been invested into Sandstone in terms of infrastructure in the complexes, our silos, which most farms don't have in South Africa, our cleaning plants, etc., etc., and of course into the land and the amount of effort that we've put into the land.
Sandstone Estates, like any successful commercial farm, has to rely on the economies of scale to be productive. A large acreage and the equipment most suited to taking advantage of it helps to ensure that crops will be harvested at their peak. In the modern world, it's an inescapable fact that it's commercial agriculture that provides food security for the planet.
The point is that if you want to feed 6.5 billion people on the planet, you can't feed them by using a horse and plough anymore. It's just not feasible. It's never going to work.
But at the same time, intensive agriculture is increasingly being recognized as a threat to the health of our environment. Countless tons of poisonous chemicals have bombarded the earth in the name of brute productivity. Arsenals of aggressive machines have stripped the land bare and destroyed the structure of the soil. On top of this, South Africa is an arid country, and once it has become overworked, soil is at the mercy of the elements.
The consensus is that if we continue to farm the way we farmed for the last 100 years, in 70 years the soils of the earth will be infertile, and we'll have to keep adding more and more chemical to the soil to be able to get the kind of crops and harvests that we want out of it.
But Sandstone Estates is proof that large-scale farming does not necessarily have to equate with the destruction of the land. It is possible to farm big, but also to farm kindly, and the key to the success of this approach lies in the soil itself. In the past, heavy cultivation and clearing of the soil would normally follow the harvest. Today, minimum disturbance of the soil preserves moisture, as well as the natural microorganisms which give it its built-in fertility.
The conventional way of farming is to offset the lands and turn everything around basically, and what you end up is with bare soil and no moisture, because the sun can bake it and the wind blows it, and basically you dry up the top soil in your lands. What we're trying to do is save as much of the moisture as we can in the lands. If you look under the mulch here, you'll see that the soil top surface is wet. What the mulch does is keep the sun out and keeps the wind away, and it doesn't dry out your topsoil.
So, when a crop is harvested, the layer of stubble that remains is deliberately left on the lands as a mulch. In addition, Sandstone's practice today is to spread a mixture of compost and manure over this residual stubble. This hastens the breakdown of the stubble to the point where it actually enters the nutrient cycle, a cycle where the remains of last season's crop feed next season's growth. Continually adding organic matter to the soil like this also affects the soil's physical structure, making nutrients more easily available to growing plants. A few months later, the young wheat sown in this way bears testimony to the success of the method. It's tall, green and vigorous, and the conserved moisture and intact structure of the soil will see that it stays that way. Natural, chemical-free soil is the very starting point of biodiversity. Soil microflora and fauna at the small end of the food chain support bigger insects, birds, and ultimately a complete ecosystem that includes even the larger mammals. A balance is finally created where nature's own methods of pest and disease control can gain the upper hand. In the 21st century, the health of our planet and all its creatures is intimately bound up with the way we farm. But in South Africa, there's a scourge that's interfering with the best intentions of almost every farmer. The problem of crime has hit the entire country, and Sandstone Estates hasn't been spared. This house is one of many on the farm that have been ransacked by criminals who seem to enjoy immunity from prosecution and justice.
Well, I think on a general basis, the farmers in South Africa are taking a lot of strain in terms of security. A lot of farm murders have occurred over the years, a lot of criminal activity taking place, theft, etc., etc. So these issues are of great concern to us, especially for Sandstone, if you like, because we're on the Lesotho border.
The meandering curves of the Caledon River constitute the border between South Africa and Lesotho. It's an established fact that most of the crime in the district originates from across the river. The official border it may be, but it's certainly no physical one. The shallow waters present no barrier to cross-border traffic, and the citizens of Lesotho take cattle across it in both directions with impunity. The signs of cattle crossing are apparent all along its banks.
The border is neglected. There's no fencing anymore, there's no police patrols. You know, about a year and a half ago the Defence Force moved out of the area and the SAPS took over the role of patrolling the Lesotho border and that type of thing. And you know, the road on the Lesotho border is in such a state, no vehicles can travel there anymore. See, these are some of the areas that we have difficulty to patrol. You know, this is where they bring cattle across. There used to be a border road. You know, there's no use even going down there now because you can't drive there anymore. It's full of holes. There's no fencing anymore, no border fence, not at all.
The illegal grazing does extensive damage to the crops and the lands, but more than that, it limits the kind of crops that can be planted, since those attractive to cattle have to be avoided. Worst of all, alien cattle import disease, with serious ramifications for farmers on the South African side of the border.
We can't have cattle. We had a herd of 1,600 cattle on Sandstone at a point in time a number of years ago. And because of the illegal grazing of cattle on our side of the border, we have transfer of disease. And what happened is that our herd basically caught contagious abortion disease from cattle that are not immunized on the Lesotho side. And we had to basically put down some of the herd and we had to sell the rest off. So we're unable to farm cattle.
Efforts to stop the incursions have proved largely fruitless, and confronting the perpetrators is often dangerous.
Like we drive around now and we'll get these Lesotho people with the cattle grazing illegally. Look here, there they come. So we better make a turn before they stone our vehicle. That will happen, definitely. I don't want to get stuck in the land here. No, if you're 5 or 6, 7 people and they stone you, just think what they will do if you're only 1 or 2. Now, this is the major problem, you know. And this brings about other crimes, you know, like then it's when they come back, they want to take something with. So they either take cattle or they break into a house or whatever they want to do, you know. That's where those type of crimes come from then.
Incidents like this happen almost every day.
We found 3 cattle inside our wheatland, which we haven't combined yet. And when we were trying to chase them out, about 8 of the Lesotho people came chasing us after us, and we eventually had to run away as they had knopkieries and dogs with them.
They will block roads so that we can't chase them. So in other words, if we were in vehicles trying to patrol, and there happens to be an incident, they will actually barricade the roads with big rocks so we can't actually chase after them. The police don't have the manpower or the material, vehicles, etc., to be able to patrol these borders. And we're in constant touch with the South African police services. We've written to Pretoria, we've written to people high up in government, we've written to a lot of people, and in fact have had little or no response. So security for us, it means a huge amount of expenditure, and annually it adds up to hundreds of thousands of rands, which is something we can do without. Because obviously we'd like to put that money back into farming, which is our business. Our business is not trying to secure the border.
That should be the business of the state. But the state has reneged on its responsibility to protect its citizens and their property. The whole agricultural sector is under some degree of threat, and rural development is not being given the attention it deserves, not even in South Africa, let alone Lesotho. Poverty gets a grip on a neighbouring territory and spreads its effects across the border.
I understand to a certain extent that the poverty in Lesotho goes part and parcel with the crime in South Africa. I mean, if you have a family of you and your wife and 6 kids, you know, and 200 meters from you there's a maize crop, and you are starving, it just makes sense that you will come across the river and help yourself to something to eat for your family. Not that it's right, but yes, I am quite sympathetic towards them, yes, I am.
Though compromised by regional and cross-border crime, Sandstone has nonetheless created the jobs that are the only permanent way to address poverty. It's also seen to it that these jobs are properly managed, ethically as well as legally.
We keep to the labour law, we implement the labour law, we do all the things that are laid down in the labour law, which is all well and good, that is regulated. But what we do is we basically look to see what our moral obligation is, and I think that if you have humanity and you follow the laws of the country, you will succeed in that respect.
Part of this humanity is simply forming relationships of trust and integrity with other farmers and their unions. Sandstone is proud to be a member of the National African Farmers Union and is in constant dialogue with its top leadership, where there's a growing awareness that South African agriculture is at a crossroads that could go either way. The union is headed up by Motsepe Matlala, a progressive thinker who acknowledges the need for unity in the sector.
There is no time for fighting. There is time to make business. There is time to create jobs. There is time to work with labor, with civil society, with everybody, to come up with a nation that will win.
South African agriculture is at a point where government needs to come out in full support of all farmers, farmers who are in the critical business of producing food for the nation.
Remember that we are the future. Remember that we have to create partners. Remember that we have to make sure that we do not collapse the commercial sector. It will be a very serious blow. We can't do that. Rather, we must add value to it so that the production level can be increased to make sure that we win as a nation.
The shareholders of Sandstone Estates have made a vast financial and personal commitment to South Africa. The challenge is to ensure that the future remains stable, so that South African commercial farming can continue to be productive. Food security is the most fundamental of a nation's assets. The responsibility of looking after it rests squarely upon the shoulders of the leaders of our country.